talks about disability as well as like violence against people with disabilities. It's not like graphic at all. It just mentions it. If that's, I'll go with everyone.
Yep.
Cool. Disability is perpetually omitted from academia, excluded from united movements, and marginalized the affirmative forefronts of discussion to challenge the erasure of crip bodies in education, or Fennell 2000. Even though critical theories of education privilege the theorization of the body around access to race, class, gender, and sexuality, they consistently admitted the mention of the disabled body as such omissions reflect the historical practices in both the American education and continue to marginalize the issue of disability as they continue to contribute to the unemployability of disabled people in. It's ironic that critical theories of education are now regarding the issues of disability since these theories come to be united in their attempts to empower the powerless and transform social inequalities and injustices. And disability scholarship is beyond identity politics. It's the identity of imperfection to access and collective struggle with difference. Shawwell 16. The refusal of certain identity politics, the refusal of pluralism, and delineation between those who practice holding a model disability identity was interpretable as a disability need not be tethered to a disability identity, race and gender, class, and sexuality, and disability. They have been acknowledged as conditions for hierarchies of power, making kids women into an intertwined vectors of struggle for freedom. The important thing about social relations and oppressions that they not have some inherent meaning, but instead of what the manifest of the conditions of hierarchies of power that is important about fast liberation. Sites of oppression can become sites of liberation with the social relations that determine what makes that difference will be dynamic and stifling, identifying into critical disability practice, not rely on fixed experience or stable identity. The category disabled is heterogeneous, so there's never been a sense of defining characteristic capable of encompassing the scope of disabled lives, headed lives, and inclusionism is a normative approach for disabled bodies in the educational space, saying that success and progress has happened because the most able disabled bodies have proceeded leaving behind bodies that cannot return to success. Mitchell Snyder, Ware 14. The critique of inclusionism acknowledges the disciplinary nature of public education, normalizing objectives, inclusions, and the self-hatred within a field of model of adaptation curriculum students cannot readily compete with their non-disabled peers. What if a feeling of threat is in predetermined educational process understood by the product of active refusal to pivot disability paradigms adoptively dictated by normal institutional expectations. They operationalize inclusion claims to success wherein the normative accomplishments of the most disabled students eclipse the struggles of those who left behind. Inclusionism covers an unethical promotion of success based on the few based on the normative standards of the achievement of the inadequacies of the many, and this violence means that disabled people are disproportionately punished in the educational space, both physically and psychologically. Hoffman 10. Students with disabilities make up 18.8% of those who receive corporal punishment, even though they respond to 13.7% of the nationwide student population. Children with disabilities are disproportionately corporally punished because of disability. We must move beyond the tolerance of disability to challenge internalized ableism and self-hatred because caused by societal abuse of disability to love ourselves, not for how much we can do to better ability, rather for understanding that accepted failure is success for the disabled body. Campbell 8. The existence of disability is tolerated rather than celebrated as part of human diversification that internalized ableism utilizes the distancing disabled people from each other and the emulations of disabled people and of able forms of the experience of disablement can be spoken in terms of communal trauma and the legacies of ableism to pervade both conscious and unconscious problems. Unlike many other minorities, disabled people have fewer opportunities to level collective conscious identity or culture level and interrogate cultures of ableism. The delusion of defiance, reason, familiarity, and histories for the marginalized population. This personal consequences can generate internalized ableism because congregating with other people with appearance of gender is interpreted as negative. In choices attitudes of relatively capital states for a system of diagnostic apartheid and blood breaking of bodies over the type and severity of impairment. The desire to like the other attempts to maintain a wide gap between those and those who are which are below those who desire their few opportunities to find sanctuary and who are healing and sheltering with the force of ableism, internalized ableism. The disabled child subject is caught in order to take the benefit of disabled identity. One must participate in the process of disability, disavowal, environment, performativity, state of near body, and is a state of passing, keeping the colonizer happy, but not disrupting the peace containing the matter. It is potentially out of place, and ableist normalcy exclusionary practice makes ongoing eugenics and information inevitable. Round 11. We are being taught the differences are wrong. Society reacts to people with disabilities found affecting the norms, and it results in the unequal power structure that creates structural make for those who've been other Western society views all disabilities as abnormal, and thus approaching people with disability as tragic people who live their lives on with living. Eugenics is very much present in social attitudes toward disabilities. Being eugenics toward the normal, the cultural landscape outlined in order to support the hegemony of inhabitants by silencing those who are perceived with disabilities and deeming them as lesser than the normal humans of society. We value the lost lives of those considered too different from the mythical norm. Society expects those to be those abnormal to doubt by removing themselves from view, being silent and isolated. Therefore, we must advocate curricular epistemologies to embrace failure of crip debaters to normate, to engage in crip epistemological pedagogy of education. Mitchell, Snyder, and Ware 14. Curricular epistemology involves the development of teaching pedagogies that deviate from the core teachings by foregrounding curricular content as failure through the pedagogical incoherence offers social options for constructing an alternative ethical framework for living, provide opportunities for curricular embodiments to speak better on the political developments of the contemporary existence. It is neither discourse of specialness nor do we find that the value of disability guaranteed over by social barriers inside according to the body, so they include, cut the card include, and debate mandates endless ability checks, internalize ableism, psychic knowledge assimilation into normative debate fails, and reinforce safety that the body's normally going to take consistent normalization practice. You have to upstate standards. Richard 15. The interest of the impaired body to lead us to competitive academic space and kills microaggressions in normative communications and the framing of intellectual work by efficiency normativities. Actions around which atypical body has captured discipline to exist in debate is to constantly answer. I believe responsibly the body becomes incapacitated by institutional limitations. All containment is an endless set that impairs disabled bodies, and the role of the ballot is to endorse the discourse that most authentically represents underlying power performatively and methodologically. Mary 99 bracket for ableist language. The world can only exist in experiences in human relationships. We feel ourselves if we regard this as power out there. Power is personal exists within relationships. Therefore, represents answering what to be. We are oblivious to violence. The actor becomes crucial determinant in the necessary to question what is our to question our perspective, reflect upon a perspective which not only locates violence out there as we stand detached. I can show you where I cut cards if it wasn't clear.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just like you just have to download the doc so that you can.
Gotcha. Do you want me to just resend it with the...
If you want to, I don't know.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll just redo it because it's just easier.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, I just sent it. Or, now I just sent it. When you're yeah, let me know. Cool.
Everyone good?
Mm-hmm.
What does the role of the ballot mean? Like,
Yeah.
how do we engage it?
Yeah, so you want what the neg should do, or how the app functions with it?
Both.
Okay, so I'll start with the app. So the way that the app functions is it's through exposing the parts of our power relations that create these bad relations. I.e., when we talk about violence, often in debate with fiat and stuff, we say oh, there's racialized violence happening within the status quo, but then we don't talk about why this violence occurs, especially in the space that we are competing in. So basically, we talk about there's two ways that the app is really good under the world ballot. First is how we don't analyze how debate functions in an ableist way. So through affirming and combating debate's ableist tactics by not adhering to the topic and not adhering to the psychological violence and normalization practices in debate. Then we are kind of uncovering the ableist notions of debate. That's
so
a
it's
really
just
good thing.
an explanation argument.
What?
So it's like an explanation argument, i.e. that we need to explain how this power functions.
Well, not really. It's more just it's also about the authenticity of how you represent said power. So it's also, the rest of it is so ableism exists, right? We know ableism exists. But then it's also what makes it so that ableism exists and perpetrates our spaces. Why is it that disabled kids are forced to be normative? That's the crypt failure argument that we make, which is curricular epistemologies, that in inclusionist education, it's not enough. Because,
so then what does the neg do? What would the neg do to
Yeah, so you can do a lot of things. So first, you can say that my performance is bad, or my performance is problematic. You can say that the methodology is bad. It's going to come down to a methods debate. This, I'm not I wouldn't hinge the debate on this being my identity as being disabled. It's about methods. So you have to provide a better method and say where my method is bad.
Cool. So then let's talk about the Mitchell evidence. Can you
Cool. Which one?
The inclusion bad.
Yeah.
Evidence. Okay. So you make this argument that inclusionism is bad, within educational systems.
Yeah.
Right. So what does this inclusionism look like?
Yeah. So inclusionism is the idea where we're no child left behind. Every child must basically no child left behind is the best example. But it's basically a child will always be left behind because they have to leave their identity behind. Because in order to become a child or a student, you have to be part of the normative definition of what it is to be a student or to be a person in an academic space.
Okay.
I
in an academic space.
Yes.
Okay. So then, what do you do to I guess deal with the fact that debate as an educational space is inherently going to have these structures within it?
Yeah, so we don't claim that we solve for ableism in debate. We say that our method is good to solve back the harms of the app. But we make no claims that by reading this app we solve everything, because that would probably contradict the claims of the app. We also say that function of affirming, and that the only way we can affirm things and have good arguments is that we have to be able to solve them and solve normative things. It's just another normative and constitutive part of debate that for like the burden of rejoinder is just basically like if you cannot assimilate into what you're supposed to be, then you fail and are subject for eugenics and extermination, i.e. like drop the debater scenarios.
Okay, sure. Starting prep now. What does the method look like?
Yeah,
An example of like, doing it.
Yeah, so first it would be like me not losing rounds because I wasn't able to like remember that one spike because like my disability makes me like have really bad memory, especially in the short term. So it would be like I don't get punished because I missed like a certain line, or like other disabled students
Wait,
are
isn't
not.
that just an example of inclusionism?
No, inclusionism is the idea that like everyone's included, unless like just like in general everyone's included. The app says we need to prioritize what it means to like prioritize disabled bodies within the academic space because inclusionism is not enough. Because inclusionism always always excludes disabled bodies, even if it says like we're inclusionist, it always takes out disabled bodies.
Sure.
So like yeah, I can be here and talking to you, but like that doesn't mean that like I don't still have a disability, and this is just me performing as a able-bodied person that debate wants me to be.
Alright, cool. Alright, 2 please. The order is 1 off, please. That should be sent. Make sure that it's sent correctly because like some of my dogs have been sending like for some reason.
I am not on you. Okay.
Okay.
Let me just. I have to open a new template. It's just loading. Okay, cool.
Yeah, good. What's how many off?
1 off.
Cool.
And then it's not down.
Cool.
Rights discourse position and marginalized groups as competitors for the recognition of protection of hegemonic powers. The state consists of reason scarcity, so that people adapt to society and neglect other modes of existence while Hellier one. Comparatively, allows minoritized groups to gain recognition from hegemonic powers and only grant a certain number of exceptions to the access to the spheres of full humanity. This feeds into a discourse of putative scarcity where subjugated groups compete for limited resources, leading to a strengthening of the very mechanisms that deem certain groups not quite human. This is uniquely problematic in the way that the app conceptualizes of inclusion. You say that we can include discourses of disability into an educational system that was structured on exploitation. This is a perf problem with the app method. How can we truly disengage from the ideas of success and embrace failure when the point of this argument is to succeed in winning a ballot? This creates the conditions for the European man to make himself a universal human, racializing assemblages, naturalize the demarcations between human and not quite human. Rather, we should question the very nature of humanity. Thus, the role of the ballot is to vote for the debater who better deconstructs the European man. What Hellier 2. Western modernity gave way to man as man, black subjects support the disabled, and so on. Surface limit cases by which man can market himself as the universal human. Liminal spaces construct new objects of knowledge and launch the reinvention of the human. The black man must be black in relation to the white man. The colonial encounter determines the very being as he or she, which is not quite human. The human is defined by organic and symbolic registers and institutions and human subjects, an implemented mode of being. Racialization figures as a master code that clearly distinguishes the human from the not quite human. Political violence serves to create not quite humans. Liminality contains extra strategies from the world of man. We must question what it is to be human. Racializing subjects maintain distinctions. Man versus human are articulates them in totality so as to abolish man. Thus, I affirm the method of habeas corpus rather than dialectically oppose the European man. We affirm the forms of freedom created when we break from conformity to man in order to create ultimate genres of humanity. This also means we solve case with Hellier 3. Black studies cannot fall prey to irritation of humanity. Hieroglyphs of flesh should not be conceptualized as exceptional. This leads to imperative tabulation. Man represents the Western human as a liberal subject who renders all those who do not conform exploitable non-humans. The habeas corpus of the flesh are not concerned with inclusion, but the continuing development of a collective consciousness for liberation. Habeas corpus translates the hieroglyphs of the flesh into a potentiality and even all things. Habeas corpus animates the elsewhere of man. Habeas corpus unearths the freedom within the hieroglyphs of the flesh. Now on case. One is an overview of the app. The one is he separates person and problem and human, rendering the moon as an object of unity. This positions the judge as a Western subject to appropriate and resolve the pain only when they are compelled enough to care, where each successful ballot elevates their power. Element 4. Pain is continually both in public discourse as established demands a response. It focuses on the emotions of the reader. Pain of others is not about the other, but about the reader. Apparently shared negative feelings do not position the reader and the victim in a relationship of equivalence. Rather, that they remain the object of a feeling. The agent of the stories is not the other, but the reader who is also elevated into a position of power over others. It fixes the other as the one who has pain and who can overcome the pain only when the Western subject feels moved enough to get. This is particularly problematic in the context of the app, because if we are looking to the way that disabled people are treated within debate, then the positioning all of that power in the hands of the judge to determine when to treat disabled people appropriately or not to treat them appropriately is uniquely bad, because it's just going to reproduce these types of psychological violence and exclusion, especially when you have like an ableist judge who doesn't care about what is happening. That is just going to continue to happen. And 2 is that the app is a double turn. You could treat inclusionism, but don't account for the fact that this app is inclusionism, i.e. attempting to make debate an inclusive space. If we accept the premise of failure, then how can debate ever be a site of liberation in the context of disability? You just try to say that somehow we can like change these educational structures, but there's no clear warrant on why that's going to happen, i.e. the arguments that I just made about why judges who are ableist are not actually going to want to listen to these arguments and want to engage with them is uniquely problematic. And 3, this is even a turn under the app role of the ballot. If we care about both performance and method, then we need to understand whether our practice within debate is specifically bad. And 4, turn the idea that you can include an understanding of disability into the system that creates the problem only reproduces the very violence that you attempt to solve. Because if we are going to try to solve this type of violence, we should not be looking to trying to use the tools that has been constructing the violence in the first place, i.e. We can look to the method of habeas corpus, which rather than attempting to operate within this same system and use these same tools, we break away from these structures that continue to marginalize people and break away from this machinic understanding. So line by line, first now on the app line by line specifically. So first on the Shawwell evidence that it's not a static identity, this is not true. You are making yourself static and knowable by specifically discussing this in the context of debate and coming out, not coming out, but identifying specifically as a disabled person. You have told the judge a specific subject position that they will now associate with you. This is definitionally making yourself knowable to a machine. Also, you never justify you never justify in the arguments about why we can retool educational spaces, you never justify why this is actually going to be able to work in the context of debate. Debate is a fundamentally competitive activity, which means that people are not actually focused on how we can be more inclusive. People are just generally going to be focused on trying to win a round. So specifically in the context of debate, it is uniquely bad, and it is a really problematic instantiation of success culture, which is exactly what your app criticizes. It's not a question of the app ideology, but rather the question of whether the app is combat. or compatible with the way that debate as an institution functions, because the judge is inherently looking at it as an idea of like success versus failure in the context of the round, whether you have like succeeded in proving your narrative is true, which contradicts the arguments about accepting failure. So to break this down, the AF, like regardless of whether you buy that the method itself is a good thing, you should question whether the AF can actually function within debate as an institution. Because the way that debate like conceptualizes how individuals interact with one another is inherently contradictory to the AF methodology and to the AF ideology, which means that you can't, like, it is not compatible with literally functioning within the space. It's not a question of whether the AF is true or not in that argument, but rather a question of whether it literally works and is a double turn. Also, the Ahmed evidence is like really important in this case because you, like, as a disabled person, are giving someone else power to determine how they are going to interact with your identity. You are not taking that power back for yourself, but rather operating within this like machine that is still trying to categorize you into specific like categories. I.e., like that is what the Wahelier evidence is explaining, is that when we look to these like categorizations, that is what allows us to determine who is like the ideal human and how, like, who is a deviation from that ideal human, i.e. the European man. So, lastly, on the like role of the ballot question, you can classify the Wahelier 2 evidence, which is talking about why the European man is like the root cause of these types of violence. This is actually an even better form of your role of the ballot because we are looking specifically to how power can function within all of these cases and not just in the context of disability, but it does include the idea of disability within it because disability functions within the facializing machine as a like limit case to like as the card literally says, the disabled, or and so on, serve as limit cases by which man can demarcate himself as the universal human. Thus, anything.
Cool. Ready for CX?
Yeah, give me a second to get water.
I know this. Good?
Yeah.
Status of the alt?
On condo.
Will you go for the alt as a floating pick in the 2N?
No.
Cool. All right. Cool. Okay. That's a no.
No.
Awesome. Okay. Let's go on the links. Can you walk me through the links, especially on the Wahelier K, especially as like specific to the AS discourse?
Okay, sure. So the Wahelier 1 evidence is labeled as 2, but like the numbers are all off.
Yep.
Like Wahelier 1 is arguing that like when we focus on the types of like rights discourse,
Where does the app talk about rights discourse? Can you point to me like in the app where it's rights discourse?
Okay. So here, I'll just pull up the app. Like
yeah, okay, that's fine. So you say that like how the app conceptualizes inclusion. How does the neg conceptualize inclusion?
that's the point. Like the neg doesn't conceptualize inclusion.
So then what's the alternative? Like what should we do then?
Okay, that's the point. So like habeas fiscus as the method is not attempting to include ourselves into these structures, but rather breaking away from them. So like an example of this could be like the Black Panthers or like Drop City, which
Okay,
is consistent.
can you give me an example of one that has happened, especially for disabled people?
Like no, that's the like point of these communities is that they are breaking away from those like concepts that we have to categorize ourselves into like certain like ideas.
Okay,
right?
what does it mean to be categorized? How are we categorized usually? Like, is it only through like disability, or like are we categorizing other things like affirming versus negating?
I mean, like you could make the argument that you're categorized in other ways. I would say that like that's a different type of categorization, right?
Okay,
like,
actually that's fine. How does the alt function? What does the world look like in the world of the alt?
Sure. So the examples that I just gave, which would be like Black Panthers or Drop
Okay.
City, would be ways to open.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about, on the app, what is this double turn you're making about inclusionism? Because I'm just kind of confused.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you mean like the 2 point?
Yeah, just like you keep saying double turn, like you want a successful ballot. When does the app call for the ballot having to do with identity?
Can you, like, what do you mean?
What part of the app is specific to, like, how my identity functions?
It's not a question of, like, how, like, maybe I'm, like, misinterpreting your question, but it's not a question of, like, how your identity functions,
Okay,
but rather
that's fine,
saying,
actually.
Like,
on the static identity point, you say that since I talk about myself being disabled, then that's bad. So what else should we do? Should we just, like, never talk about our identities?
no, like, the argument isn't, like, never talk about your identities, but rather it's the way that you talk about your
Wait,
identities.
so then what's the way we should talk about it? Because it seems like with the critique, you'd be saying that we should not categorize ourselves. So then should we never, like, think about who we are as our identities? Like, how do I
So,
understand who I
You have
am?
to the idea behind the critique is that you would conceptualize of your identity as something that is imposed upon you, but
Wait, but how is my disability imposed upon me? Like, my bipolar disorder is pretty shitty, and I don't think, like, that was imposed upon me. I was born with it.
No, that's the point, though. Is, the way that society treats you differently is what is imposed upon you. Like, the idea
Okay, but then how does the ALP solve back how I'm being treated in society?
Sure. So, do you want to take prep, or do you just want
I'll start prep.
Okay, so, the idea is that habeas fiscus would operate outside of that social structure that operates off of the assumption that we have this European man that we can compare people to.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Minute left. Okay. Order is going to be AC, overview on the AC, then the AC proper, and then the NC.
Are you reading anything new?
No.
Cool. I'm good. 1 second. I need to get to the. Sessions and bid run. I was really hoping when she's down.
Wait, which game?
Seth.
Alright.
Yeah, I'm good.
Chillin'? Okay.
Yep.
Debate is ableist forces a normative assimilation that's Richard 15 norm heresy. These assimilation forces disable debaters into a paradox. Either they're able to succeed normalization, become the most able to single body, or they're not able to assimilate, they're exterminated. That's Brown. Also, inclusive education is not enough. The role of the judges should not just be an inclusive educator, but to take an active stance against the lived and real violence that perpetrates our academic and competitive space. That's the epistemology of the, that's our epistemology argument. Vote act because we don't want to affirm an ableist resolution. Disability hinges on relative ability. So ableist topics and trying ableism in debate also because we also win because we are winning a better method and our argument is better. Epistemology solves back well, I'll get to my epistemology solves decay, but on the K proper, on the I proper. First, the Hoffman card is not responsive. We do not separate we don't separate the self from the body because for disabled students, the self is the body. There's no way to separate this. Means that the argument on this successful ballot, we are not calling for the ballot because of our identity. We're calling for the ballot because we were the better debater and we had a better argument. We solved back the hard side of the AC with a good method. Also, the next argument we're going to go for is beyond is illusory. It doesn't matter what's going to happen in a round later. It's about competing methodologies and what are good ideas. If the app is a good idea by the end of the debate, then you affirm. You can already affirm because there's nothing like all of their we're not responsive to the app warrants. It's literally just like the app is inclusionist and like we can't fail. But no, we obviously aren't. And even if debate is a competitive space, it's still like it's not a great response. On the inclusionism argument, the absence of inclusionism is epistemology. You can extend the Mitchell and Snyder argument that inclusionism is the idea that no child is left behind, but in reality there are children that are left behind because they're the ones who cannot assimilate into what normativity is. That means that the epistemologies are solving back for inclusionism, which means that we need to take an active stance against ableism, especially in academic spaces. This is the Arabella's argument. This is going to go really good against the Cade Center, Arabella's 2000, which extended Arabella's 2000, which says that currently in academics, disabled students and disability studies is not put in the argument for a liberatory strategy. Thus, the app is key. Also, if we lose to succeed, I somewhat win because I'm a competitive debater and my argument is good. So if we are, but either way, since I'm a disabled debater, if we fail in some part of the flow, then we should win to prove that disabled people can be beautiful. If they lose something on the double term, if is illusory, we're in a debate round that also non-verifiable. We don't know. Also non-verifiable. We don't know if the judge is ableist or not. This is not a great argument. Also, the stack identity argument cross-apply the Schaubel argument that disability can be a multitude of things. It is not a static identity. Also, this justifies forced outing and normative assimilation. I'm unapologetically myself, and I will never not be disabled by forcing me to just become this all embodied identityless person. Makes me not become myself, which we say is the only way that we can allow ourselves to become beautiful as the app. Also, we win. Also, yes, debate is competitive, but I'll win because I debated better. My method was better. I'll argue with the perm. Also, the success versus failure, the contradicts accepting failure thing is not verifiable. We don't know if a judge is ableist. Also, we don't care about what happens after the round. This is about competing methodologies. If mine is good and I win offense, which means you should be able to affirm right now. On the critique. One, there's no link. The app is not about rights discourse. There literally isn't a link. By saying that we have an identity, they might say by saying we have an identity, but we link, but no, the K and the alter is not compatible. We are saying they literally are arguing for the same thing. It's also extend the Arabella's argument, which means that the perm is good. It's going to be the net benefit to the perm that we don't have the communities that they talk about of how we can combat against the European man. We also is inaccessible to their modes of resistance are inaccessible. They're inaccessible. What if we can't get out to the Black Panther March or be able to throw wall at Stonewall? That means that we should look at curriculum epistemologies first. Also, perm shows the links we can advocate for how identity works in the space, and the Shuffle evidence is really good for this. There's no static version of identity. Also, their model debate says we should not understand what means to have an identity, which brings to the perm. We can know how disability identity functions, and then we can have curriculum epistemologies. The perms are perm to both, perm to the app and the all mindset, and perm double. I'll just go perm to both and perm to the app and the all mindset. It obviously shields links.
You only made the two terms, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if from the
Dad is this is like pretty risky. I think you can execute. I wanted you to go in head turns in 1 AO, like straight 4 minutes, which would be sick, but he didn't want to. So he just put a ton of util offense in the app, but like he made it seem like Agnes offense, so we're just gonna kick that Agnes and go for util anyway. So just
Yeah. Offense wise, you just really need to
because what's the one in season? Actually, I like the point. Well, it's too late now.
It's also hard to predict. You know what I'm saying?
They have a really long framework. They don't know I can do anything, but it takes time for them to read it.
They might, I feel like they might just got
This kid is not good.
if it's yeah, I mean I would just default like just be just be utility for
Yeah, I don't know why. He doesn't even usual app. The thing is, I don't. He doesn't like. I don't know. He doesn't have a usual app.
well not you have tons of util offense, like enough util offense to make
That is true. Yes.
do you have enough util offense to make a util app?
Maybe.
Because
Because the other side, well, because the panel like will listen to framework, so I think like I wanted to be able to make the call in the way I was supposed to. I'm gonna. But once I chose this game, some cases in an audit, I see 20. So I don't know what that was about. So I don't know.
what was the 20?
I don't know. I have to call him for no knows. Judges have no idea. You can look at it. It's not easy. Also, the sophomore, like the novice version of this tournament, is called the sophomore Hood. That's not a good title.
It's like a Texas thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good. Whenever.
What's the order? Oh, the order's gonna be overview on the critique proper, then the
Okay.
worst case scenario, you can vote on some of the case stories. The app is a perfcom because it tends to function within a toxic success culture and an educational sphere without justifying how this doesn't actually reproduce the very same violence that has always occurred. We agree. Actually, yeah, we look to the way that. Yeah, actually, sorry. All this is going to do is just reentrench the divide between those included and excluded once the machine shifts to incorporate a different group. That's what Hellier won. The ass mindset just reinforces the idea that the judge or that the debate sphere can somehow guarantee these protections or rights to disabled individuals. That's literally the thesis of the argument. You say that you're not rights discourse, but no, that's the entire point is that you are premising this argument on the idea that debate can somehow be inclusionary or that the judge can somehow be inclusionary towards people with disabilities. But that's the entire thing that you were trying to critique, and you fall into that exact same mindset. You can also extend the Hellier 2 evidence, which is the role of the ballot arguments, which is the role of the ballot is to vote for the debater who better deconstructs the European man and figure all bodies are compared against. This creates the conditions for, between humans and not quite humans. It's the root cause of all violence, i.e. dehumanization of bodies based on their difference from that idea. So if we look to this argument that goes functionally co-conceded in the role of the ballot debate out of the 1AR, which is that it is a root cause claim, i.e. if we are looking to the way that we can best conceptualize of how these forms of marginalization occur, then we need to, one, look to things past just like a single instance of marginalization, and that is the best way to conceptualize it is via the European man conceptualization, and two is that it is a better way of explaining why disability is like conceptualized as a bad thing within modern society, because it is conceptualized via the faciality machine. So the idea here is the European man is some like mythical figure that is the ideal human subject, and that anyone who is not that figure is somehow a deviation from that idea and a bad thing. That is how we can conceptualize a disability in a way that is different from the app. You're just trying to make this argument that somehow this forces you to disengage from your identity, but no, it's a different way to conceptualize of identity, because you are not identifying with something that is imposed upon you. The idea is that if your identity and the way you are treated is something that is imposed upon you, that you are identifying now with something that was oppressive. Instead, we should look to create lines of flight away from surveillance. Think of 60s counterculture, or Drop City, or the Black Panthers, which rather than dialectically opposing state power sprung off in tangents of communities. This gives us an unintelligibility net benefit via Hellier 3 and solves the case. You can't be just forced into these situations of marginalization if you don't function within these apparatuses in the first place. Now, onto the perm. One, the perm do both argument literally makes no sense. Like, you try to make this argument that it somehow shields the link, but there's no warrant for why this happens, which means that the links are dishonest to the perm. Second, it's a methods debate. You don't get a perm because we're functionally debating over competing methods. Like, severing out of your method is, like, just, it doesn't make any sense, and it's actually a really bad thing if we care about trying to, like, come up with the best way to resolve these types of violence. And another is the footnoting dissad. You're just adding the alternative onto your app and taking the focus away from the critiques analysis. Rather than looking at the way that power is conceptualized within the Wahelia evidence, you were just simply trying to, like, tack it onto the way that the app wants to conceptualize power. Also, the Wahelia 2 evidence says that we must reject all instances of the European man, or else it will continue to try to categorize people into these, like, finite categories. You make this argument that somehow the method is inaccessible, but no, I never define a single way that you have to engage with the method. It is just a question of how you, like, disengage from these structures that are problematic in the first place, which you never actually respond to. You don't make any arguments as to why the alt does not actually solve the impacts of the app, because it allows us to disengage from these very structures that attempt to marginalize us in the first place, which means that even if you buy any of the arguments as to why the app solves something, the alternative is always going to be net better, because it solves not only the app's instances of the app, but it also solves the other types of repression that we conceptualize within the critique. Now on the app. First is that first on the Ahmed evidence, you completely misconceptualize what this Ahmed evidence is saying. It's not a question of whether you are, like, trying to separate the pain, but it's rather a question of the judge's power. I.e., you can't purport to, like, try to solve violence by giving the judge the power to determine, one, whether that violence has happened to you, and two, how to, like, attempt to fix that problem. You are just like surrendering your ability to control any, like, sense of what has happened to you to someone else. You make this argument that we don't know if a judge is ableist, but that's the exact point of this argument, is that you can't tell whether the judge is going to be receptive to your arguments, and you are just opening yourself up to psychological violence by standing up here and allowing the judge to have this power and control over you. Now, you're trying to make this fiat illusory argument, but this literally has no impact. Like, neither of us are trying to, like, fiat something. It's a methods debate. That's the point. Like, I don't know what this argument is supposed to do. On the static self argument, you just say that this somehow justifies forced outing, but there's no warrant to this argument. You say that we need identity to reclaim, like, or that we need this, like, identification in order to reclaim these things. It's not a question of whether we need identification. It's a question of how we do that identification, i.e. that the critique would justify like, understanding our identification as something that is imposed upon us and not as something that is intrinsic to us, i.e. we have to recognize that this society has imposed this idea of difference upon us, and that is what creates this marginalization. It's not a question of, like, something that is internal. Now, onto the inclusion arguments. Your responses here are that, like, failure equals winning, but this would justify not having the ballot. Like, you make this, like, argument that somehow, like, losing equals winning, but this doesn't actually make any sense in the context of how debate functions. You never justify why debate is not just a super toxic instance of success culture, and why it is incompatible with your app, and that it's a really important turn on the app that, like, definitely functions as terminal defense here, because there's literally no solvency coming out of the app if you are still trying to function within a toxic success culture that is debate. If we care about looking to how... Yeah, that's fine.
Cool, I have no left.
Because he's going to concede that. How could he will concede the app? He's not going to realize that.
Oh,
the
yeah,
app is
that's
working.
true, that's true.
See, I was smart. I thought about this.
That's true, that's true.
Okay. Order's going to be overview on the AC and then on the K-flow. Well, actually, I'm going to do an overview that you can fill in a separate sheet. and then it'll be the app and the K. Cool. Cool. All right. Anybody not ready? We're gonna go really hard for the perm do both here. First, we're gonna argue that these are the K and the app are functionally non-competitive. Second, that we need to put disabled students and disability discussion on the forefront because inclusive education is not enough. We argue that the NC is just another attempt at inclusionist education. That's the Arabelle's 2000 card. We're gonna go over this really hard. This goes conceded coming out of the K flow that the Arabelle's card means that in academic critical theorizing disabilities always left on the back burner and doesn't have any discourse within education means that we should talk about disabled students. That's also our epistemology argument. We critique their on the app flow. We critique their conception of solvency. We say that we critique their conception of solvency that we have to be able to solve back every single harm. We say that we never claim to solve back ableism in the debate space. We say that we are just reading a method, and if our method is a good idea, then we win. They don't contest any of the AC proper. You can evaluate this like a LARP round. If someone doesn't respond to the AC in a LARP round, but they respond kind of to the util arguments in it, that doesn't mean that the app goes away. It still means that it has merit. It means that you can try or die to the app. Which means you can try or die for the app's method. If the app method is a good idea, that's enough to pull the trigger on the AC. Also, we're putting the epistemology argument. It's a net benefit to the perm. This would be really good that she concedes that epistemology is a good idea and that it can solve back the harms of education. The arguments about this being in a debate round are still not good. We say that first we are not calling for the judge because of our identity, but rather that we are the better debater. We made better arguments. That's how debate rounds should always be evaluated. This is not about who gets the ballot because it's not about how debate is a success culture. We say that she concedes that competition is inevitable. We all want to get the ballot, but the ballot isn't around my identity or having some kind of identity. It's about comparative methods and about why my method is good. Also, in conjunction with the perm, then she says that they're also on the that's what we're gonna go for. The static identity argument gets taken out by shot. Well, that goes conceded. Also, we're gonna go for the Fiona's illusory argument that we win because our method is better. The Fiona illusory argument means that you shouldn't evaluate arguments that are like, oh, in the future judges will do this, or in the future judges will do that. This is about comparative worlds and comparative framings. We say that also this response to the response to the K really well, that it says that we should be able to deconstruct the European man in the future, not about what happens in the round right now. We are literally not saying that the argument of the deviation is not competitive with the app. You can extend the Arabelle's part first is the reason why you prefer the perm. This is the net benefit that goes conceded to the perm. You can also go for the second part, which is the perm to the app, and the alt mindset means that we can understand what it means to be disabled through the defiance claims they make, but also allow for understanding in academic space, i.e. through the debate space. This is the also we're going to go for an argument about lived experiences, i.e. they say that these things are imposed upon us, but my panic attacks are not imposed upon me. I have them myself. This means that we should be able to understand that that inclusionism is not enough. Means that the critique cannot solve this. Goes conceded that inclusionism, just inclusionism is not enough. The judge needs to be an